All right. Hello, WSU community, and welcome to the fifth and last Information Technology Services Informational Series. My name is Nathan Timms. I serve as ITS's Crimson Service Desk Manager. And on behalf of the ITS team presenting today, we welcome all WSU faculty, staff, and our wonderful students participating in today's session. We have a few intro points before we begin. The session will be recorded and it will be posted on the ITS website. A survey will be sent out at the end of the info session, and we would appreciate your feedback. In this fifth session, we are privileged to have with us Jason Flynn and Geoff Allen, and the topic they will present on is Okta Identity Access Management. Here's a little bit of a bio on Geoff. He's 30 years with WSU and 25 years serving in central IT. He is currently the manager of the Cloud Architect Engineering Group. He manages Okta and Identity Access Management for WSU. And in his free time, he does enjoy photography and playing on the saxophone. Jason, he has 10 years with WSU and 24 years working in the IT field. He is currently serving as our senior IT systems architect and serves under Geoff Allen with Okta and Identity Access Management. As we present, we would invite all of our audience to ask questions in the chat. This is a conversation as much as a presentation. And we look forward to having a discussion on identity access management. At this time, Jason, Geoff, will turn today's presentation over to you now.
All righty. So, yeah, as Nathan said, the topic is identity and access management and Okta. And probably everybody's familiar with Okta, at least to the level of, you log in using Okta when you log into things. But what does identity and access management mean? And that's kind of a jargony thing in the IT world, often abbreviated IAM. So let's start with the second thing and actually define that. And in simple terms, it covers two areas: the identity and access. Identity is your login. How you are identified to the systems so that things know who you are. And for most of things at WSU, that means your network ID. That's your network ID, is your identity as far as that goes. But there can be and probably are other identities that you have that may fall into things as well. And the other thing is access. That's what you can, and perhaps more importantly, what you can't access based on who you are. So, obviously you should have access to the things that you need to have access to, but you should also not have access to things you should not have access to. So it's a problem if you don't have the access. If you need to log into MyWSU and you can't, that's a problem. But it's also a problem if you have access to university financial data, but you don't actually have a role in dealing with the university financial data. So on the surface, that all sounds simple enough. You have a network ID, you log into things, you get to what you can get to. But as you might imagine, it gets complicated in a hurry. And that's where Okta comes in, at least in part. Okta is a tool that WSU began using in 2019, and to help with managing all of this, managing our identities and the access. Just to give you some ideas, Okta is how you log into MyWSU, Workday, Canvas, lots of other things. In fact, Okta is currently, like this week, seeing 40 to 50,000 logins per day for WSU. And, that's obviously going to go up in a few weeks when school starts. So that's the kind of traffic it sees. And we have 455 applications currently defined to use Okta. So that's things like MyWSU is one, Workday is one. There's lots of little things, there's big things. 455 things. And that's not everything at WSU. There are still things that don't use Okta. And we're just slowly trying to work on all that and get those things to go. So as you're probably familiar with, your network ID, how you log in, that identity is secured by a password and by MFA. And the reason we need both of those is because these days passwords really aren't enough to secure a login. So here's a chart from a group called Hive Systems. And you can see if you have an 8-character password, it really doesn't matter how complex that password is. Worst case scenario, if somebody has the encrypted information on your password that is stored on the computer, they can get into your account in 5 minutes. It doesn't matter what your password is if it's 8 characters. If you look at the row that has 10 characters, and if you require numbers, uppercase, lowercase, and symbols, which is the current requirement for a network ID password, 2 weeks. And that's for a random password. If there's things in your password that are guessable, like words or known sequences of numbers or anything like that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's an easy password. But for a random password, it's still 2 weeks and someone could get your password. And obviously you could get, we could say, well, okay, if you had an 18-character password that was truly random and had all the things, it's going to take 26 trillion years for somebody to get your password. We could probably say that password was secure enough. But by having another mechanism that also authenticates you, we reduce a lot of that risk that is inherent in passwords. Because with passwords, all someone needs is that password, and they can do anything you can do. So just a few tips just to get practical for passwords and for MFA. Longer passwords are better, obviously, as this chart shows. You see as you start getting in there, it goes up pretty quickly once you start getting into longer passwords as far as the difficulty of cracking that password. And for MFA, we have a handful of different forms of MFA that you can use. I would recommend, just in general, if you aren't currently using it and you have a smartphone, use the Okta Verify app. It's by far the easiest way to do the MFA. You just get a notification on your phone, you say, yes, it's me, and away you go. And but do make sure that you have more than one MFA factor set up. And preferably include some that aren't tied to your phone, because that's a common problem. Your phone gets damaged or you lose it, and all of a sudden you can't log into anything. And even if you replace your phone, which I just did a few weeks ago, the Okta Verify that's tied to your phone will no longer work with the new phone. Things like a text message to the phone will still work. And some other methods can work. But so make sure you have multiple methods and that you're not 100% reliant on the Okta Verify on your phone, because you will lock yourself out if you don't have that. And that just means you're going to have to call a Crimson Service Desk and get things reset. And you can save yourself the hassle by having multiple methods. And the other thing, it's a problem that has been increasing. Make sure you only respond to the MFA request if you initiated the thing that is causing that request. You went to Workday and logged in. You went to MyWSU and logged in, and that is why you are seeing this request from Okta Verify or whatever. Because there is a problem where if an attacker has your password, they will just flood sometimes. They will flood with requests. And what they're hoping for is at some point you'll get tired of it and you will say, yes, it's me, just to make it stop. And the second you do that, yes, you have made the request stop, but you have also just let them in to your account. The other thing that I have heard that we see is an attacker will contact people and say, hey, we're about to send you a code for verification. Can you send that code to me to prove that, we're checking your password or whatever? And so then they initiate a request. If you've got SMS set, you get a code via SMS, and they have asked you to send that code. And hey, I know why it was happening, except it wasn't you who took that action. So don't do that. So those are some just practical tips. And then the other thing that wanted to touch base on before we just open it up to questions is what the future holds. So we currently we're just starting on executing an IAM roadmap. We have a lot of future plans for our identity management. And we have a couple of kind of big idea thoughts for what we're trying to do with this roadmap. We want to empower business units to drive the institution's data. And by that, we simply mean if it's employee information, it ought to come from Workday. It sounds like a fairly straightforward concept, and it is, but there's a lot of convoluted things in place today that have just built up over time that get in the way of some of that. And the second is kind of related: remove technical constraints from business processes. A lot of times we have things that aren't actual business needs, but are simply a technical requirement or a holdover from a previous technical requirement that really just doesn't exist anymore. So removing those where we can remove them. So one question we often get is why does fill in the blank take so long? It takes a couple days to do this or to see this change. And here's kind of a picture. This is all the interconnections that happen today. And the main thing to note here is that everything talks to everything else, often in circuitous routes. And that's why some things take long. Some of these communications happen hourly or happen once a day. And if you've got some process that has to go through 3 hops to get the information to the final, to get something to Office 365 from wherever it's going, and it takes a couple hops, and one of those hops runs once a day, that's why some things take so long. So the overall goal we're trying to do is to do something more like this, where everything just talks to Okta, ideally in real time, but as close to real time as we can get them, depending on the specific thing. And with that, we should be able to make things happen a lot more smoothly, again, closer to real time. We'll probably never get all the way to real time changes, but we can hopefully get a lot closer to real-time changes. And a lot of these sorts of changes are going to be things that happen behind the scenes, under the hood. You won't really know that anything's changed unless you have direct dealings with it. So you just may get an overall, ideally, you'll get an overall general sense that things run more smoothly or more quickly or whatever. But there is one change that is happening next week that you will absolutely notice. And that is a change to the login page. So the upper left is the current login page that you're probably familiar with, and has an older look and feel for WSU websites. The lower right is what the login page is going to be changing to. It has the newest look for WSU websites. And the other big thing to notice is that there's not a password field on that screen. And the sign in button changes to next. And what is going to happen is, instead of putting your username and password on one screen and hitting submit, you're going to put in your username, hit next, username being, your NID at wsu.edu, hit next, and then you will be asked for your password. And the reason for doing that is that's going to enable some things down the road. Again, things you won't see right away, but as we move down this roadmap, we're going to have a lot more flexibility. Once we know who you are, where you're coming from, where you're going, there will be decisions that Okta can make that will be able to make some better decisions about how much do we have to do to verify who you are? Do we already know that that's really you, or do we need to jump through more hoops? Maybe if you're accessing university financial data, for example, you're always going to have to jump through those hoops. But if you're accessing other things, there's just going to be things that can make determinations on the fly, and it has to know who you are before it knows. Do I ask you for your password? Do I ask you to do an Okta verify? Things like that. So that's just a little preview of something coming next week. And with that, that's the end of the actual presentation. So we can open it up to questions. And I'll stop the share.
Wonderful. Thank you, Geoff. So right now we will open it up to the audience for questions. And to get the ball rolling, I have a question to the both of you. What are some of the most common issues or complaints you've received about identity access management, and how does Okta resolve those issues, or at least will in the future?
I'm grinning because, we would just turn a lot of those questions right back around to you as the help desk. For those who are, watching or aren't familiar, we integrate very tightly with Crimson Service Desk because, as I say, they're the face of IT. So they get to absorb all the angry villagers with pitchforks and torches, and then we get the filtered list of requests that come to us, right? So, but looking at it kind of holistically for the service, certainly password resets, as we've talked about before, always a big component when we're working with enterprise level account management, on the orders of tens of thousands, not just hundreds. And so it's a constant battle to try and figure out how we can make a password reset process as easy and apparent to an end user without compromising the security of the system. And so back to like what Geoff was saying about the multiple factors for MFA, not just you have one choice, but you have a couple. As we start to create some new habits for people, then hopefully those new habits will make things easier for those users. And as things become easier for them, the word of mouth can hopefully do us some favors there. And I had to go and do this thing, and the other person says, well, oh, why don't you do it this way? It's so much easier if you do it this way. But that relies on doing things well and earning some trust and whatnot. So that's the other aspect of this, is just the earning trust in doing things well and not dropping surprises on people. A lot of the requests that make it kind of past Crimson Service Desk and to us at more of the engineering level are the oddballs. Being a land grant university, we have to support that mission, and a lot of that mission means that we're not a business that can require everybody to own this brand of device or this brand of cell phone that's paid for by the company. We've got international students that are showing up with whatever device they brought with them, or maybe they're getting here and then hoping to purchase a device when they arrive, and they'll have it right away when they're setting up their account. We have people across the board. They could be faculty and staff even, who just don't have a smartphone. Maybe they don't want one, maybe they can't afford one. We have to be able to support everybody from the landscaper that logs in once a semester to the researcher who's working with Department of Defense data. And the kind of old way of dealing with these problems are one policy to rule them all. Well, that doesn't really work in that case. Like, how do you have a policy that meets the security requirements for the Department of Defense, but also doesn't make life impossible for the landscaper? And so working through these problems and collecting information from people all over campus about what those kinds of problems are has been a lot of our work right now, is just finding out what should our identity management landscape look like, and then how do we turn that around to all the campuses and sites and various users. Was that a non-answer?
Yeah, and I would add just another kind of frequent, well, I think of situations where it arises, it's a frequent problem. But a frequent problem we see is summed up by one of our catchphrases, which is names are hard. And we think of names as an easy thing. Everybody has a first name, a middle name, and a last name, and that is just not true. And furthermore, a lot of IT systems assume everyone has a first name, a middle name, and a last name, and they never change. And that's also not true. People change names for all kinds of reasons. And it is, and I think it's a side effect of a lot of those interconnections, as a side effect of a lot of technical assumptions and limitations. Name changes are, I think, surprisingly difficult, because you think, oh, I complete a name change, legally and everything's good. But there's a lot of work that goes on kind of behind the scenes to make the name update everywhere. And that's definitely a big thing on our radar, just to make names work better overall.
Yeah, I will admit, Jason, Geoff, we do get a lot of the questions and some of the annoyance, but something that we've heard before in the past is that, like you say, Geoff, somebody, as an example, is married, they change their last name, but maybe they don't change it within the WSU identity access systems, because then they would have to renew all of those, and it would take days and sometimes even weeks to reconnect everything. Can you expand a little bit, Jason, Geoff, on how this roadmap will solve some of these issues, specifically like with the name change as an example?
Some of that comes down to literal process mapping. So, if anybody out there is familiar with like lean manufacturing or any of the principles that came out of there, it's like value stream or anything like that, taking an existing process, so a name change. Okay, where does it start? Where does it flow through? Where are the steps that a human has to make data entry or changes or copy things? Where are the batch processes? Where are things, where's lead time accumulating? So, batch process accumulates a lot of lead time where something's just sitting and waiting. Like maybe there's a process that takes, okay, you changed your name over here in this system. Maybe it's, some application that you log into that lets you do that. And then there's a batch process that runs that takes that name change and ships it over to this other system. Well, sometimes those only run like once a day. Well, then what if there's a batch process that takes it from this system and moves it over to a third one, and that one only runs once a day? Those chain together and add up to a lot of lead time really quickly. But the other aspect of those things is the person time for doing things. Some of these processes require manual intervention. Maybe some of these things sit in a queue on Workday. Maybe some of them sit in literally on a piece of paper on somebody's desk, and then they have to go into MyWSU and do something and approve something or whatever. So once we map out those processes, we can then look at, okay, how much and what kind of time is accumulating at each of these steps. And then out of our bag of tools here, what things can we use to maybe just straight up eliminate a step, or completely overhaul workflow, or at least shrink some time. Maybe we can move from a batch process to something that's event driven, meaning if an event happens here, maybe a user's added to a group, that an API call goes out directly instead of waiting for some kind of scheduled batch job. So there's a lot of analysis that goes into things like that. I don't know if everybody here has quite heard yet, but if not, our exemplar process for this is actually the WSU hiring process. A lot of really great work was done to make that an actually fairly reliable process when you think about all of the cogs and bits and bobs that are involved in converting somebody from an applicant to an employee. But there's also a lot of room for improvement. What was done there was, in some cases, we'll call it field expedient. where it's okay, we need to get Workday online. Let's not put a barrier in the Workday project to tuning up this one process. Well, now we've got Workday online. We've got some cycles to work with the modernization team and ESG, and it even extends outside of those groups to look at, okay, where can we improve things so that we can shrink that down? Because back to the kinds of business problems that creates, if you're trying to hire a group of students to go run the welcome back to campus picnic, and you need to hire them on the spot, they're going to work for a couple hours, and then that's it. And that's the extent of their employment at WSU. It doesn't really make sense to have a 1 to 3 day long hiring process in front of that. But it's also kind of a federal law that they're actually a real employee before they start doing work. There's a little bit of a catch-22 right there now.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. So going to some of the questions from our attendees. Very first one, Geoff, you kind of already addressed it, but use of biometrics for authentication. So you mentioned that that is on the roadmap. You want to expand on that just a little bit, Geoff? Are we getting close to that, or?
There are, we know that more capabilities exist. We just recently bought some extra Okta licensing that is going to help with a lot of this roadmap. And some of the things that are now available to us, there's work to do in getting that there. But Okta is able to have things like, hey, I know you're on a device that you've done a biometric authentication to, your face or your fingerprint or whatever. And Okta will be able to use that information. And that's the kind of thing that we're working toward. We don't have specific plans in place yet, but those are capabilities that exist and things that we will be working toward, because yeah, I mean, that's obviously way better than a password that could be theoretically cracked. Is if my fingerprint is the only thing that gets me in. That's obviously much more secure.
Yeah, unless they somehow cloned your fingertip, right?
Right.
All right, wonderful. We do have another question from one of our attendees talking about apps that use AD and IDAP.
LDAP.
LDAP, sorry.
That's an L.
Right. There's an L there. And would it be part of the roadmap to use Okta for that?
So there is support for an LDAP, we'll call it connector to Okta. LDAP is just a tricky fit for what we'll call cloud workloads, and Okta lives in the cloud. On premises, it can even be a little bit difficult just because of the size of our directory. And think of the poor printer that like, oh, I'm going to go and hook up this printer and hook it up to Active Directory, and then Active Directory happily gives back the results of the LDAP query that's very broadly written, and the printer falls over dead at the size of the response and the multiple pages and the multiple minutes it takes to send that response. So it's just a protocol that is difficult to fit into cloud environments. Now, that's not to say that it can't be done or that it shouldn't be done, but it's one of those things that I think we're hesitant to say, just yes, use Active Directory to LDAP, it'll be wonderful, because there's a few tricks to making it work well. What we found is in cases where we had an LDAP requirement, by looking at some of the other options that are available, that we could either find a workaround or a different solution, or in some cases it's just a matter of time, just waiting for the next version of that. But certainly, Sean, send a ticket through Crimson Service Desk with what app you have in mind and what your use case is, and they'll bounce it up to us, and we can look at it and see, is this something that we can do right away? Is this something that we can help you work with the vendor? We often, another piece that I'll mention with LDAP is there's really two components there. There's the authentication piece, but then there's also the component that's more like directory synchronization. So, you have your Windows server and it knows about Active Directory, and so it has this list of groups and users and everything, and you can use that within the application. That's another aspect of this that has its own set of different quirks to it. And there's, I won't go into the details on it because I'd spend the whole remainder of this session talking about it, but suffice it to say, there's those two halves to that question, and there may be different solutions to each half to come up with something that works for the whole application, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and just as a general rule, as we do all this, our intention is not to break things unless we absolutely can't avoid breaking them, right? So things like legacy apps, those obviously exist. So like Jason said, yeah, reach out, and we'll probably our goal is going to be to over communicate the things we're doing, if anything. So especially if we're going to break something, right? We're going to really try to make sure that people know that this is going to break. We're sorry. But yeah, our goal would be that to help you find us some solution that will work going forward with whatever we're doing.
I'd say keep your eye on the ITS website. We're working with the ITS communications team to get that updated. Right now our focus has been on the login page, but after that, we're going to start adding more content for kind of project updates, so you can see where we're at on the roadmap, because this roadmap isn't something that's going to be done like, oh, December we'll be finished. No, December we're going to be just getting started.
This is life goals, not a specific project.
Yeah, and so it's really a project of projects of projects. And so hopefully we'll make it visible enough where, if there's one specific component that you're really interested in, that you'll have a way to keep track of that and watch for like, oh yeah, okay, they're getting, they did this one, they did this one, now they're getting close to the one that I want. I'm gonna go bug them about it. And likewise, we're trying to make it easier to submit, bugs, feature requests, improvements. And so stay tuned for more information about there. Probably you'll see stuff come out through like sys managers or maybe ATO meetings about, basically a public bug reporting page. Just go and put your request in there. We'll do some moderation of it to, consolidate duplicate requests, but then add in the dependencies on that so you can see like, oh yeah, we're aware of that and it's tied to this thing in the project, so you can keep an eye on the piece that relates to it. But also, I got some side questions here about kind of early adopter questions too. And so for a lot of these things, we are going to be looking for, smaller groups of people to work with, because again, we're not going after the old one size fits all, or it's more like the one size fits none. So, if there are special cases, bring them up and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, volunteers for tribute, huh, Jason? That's impressive. So there's another question that was asked by one of our attendees, which we do hear on occasion, and the situation is a complaint where they've logged into a web browser, into a resource, and then they open up another web browser. It's the same browser, maybe it's all in Chrome, and then they're having to re-authenticate within the same resource. And so there's a lot of re-authentication happening, through MFA or through passwords, etc. And so from your perspectives, is there anything that users can do to reduce the volume of re-authenticating? And is there anything on the roadmap that you all are engineering on the back end to assist with individuals that have to go through multiple systems or even the same system and find themselves having to re-authenticate multiple times?
There's probably not much that users can do to directly solve that. And the reason is because those are, I hate the word policy because it means two completely different things at the same time and often in the same sentence. So there is a technical policy that can be applied either globally for everybody logging into our Okta environment or at an application level. And if they're done at the application level to say, every time you hit this application, you must MFA, there shouldn't be anything that the user can do to get around that. Now, a lot of those requirements were put in place because, again, sort of out of expediency to know that, okay, if we require MFA across the board and we always check it for this thing, we're covered and we're not leaving ourselves open to attacks where it's someone coming from the machine that the user was using, but it's not the user themselves. That's what that's really designed to address. So instead now we have, again, more tools in our tool belt now. So relying on things like device trust, where you register a specific device. So, your phone, your laptop or whatever, you go through a registration process that you then say, trust this specific device and don't bug me as much when I come from this specific device. Then when you log in with a different machine, or sometimes it could be you travel, or you hit a system that has higher security, then we can step up to an additional level of MFA where required. And so it's really, think of it like encompassing all of the W's, the who, what, when, where, why kinds of questions, but applying that to MFA. So it's not just, oh, you're going to Workday, every time you get there, you have to MFA. We can be more subtle, but being more subtle comes with some more time. And so that's part of that initial, it all ties around to reducing MFA fatigue. It's not like the case that Geoff mentioned is kind of the easiest one to picture, of some attacker just sending you tons and tons and tons of MFA prompts, but we're essentially doing it to ourselves because we have to MFA so many times every day. So, this all loops back around on it and has to be really looked at holistically. By reducing the number of times that we ask a user to MFA, we can be increasing the MFA, the security of our overall MFA process. But then we have to make sure that we've done the extra diligence to make sure that in those cases where you really, really, really need to prove who you are at that point in time, that's there. But again, that's where things like the biometrics can come in. If you're using your phone or a laptop with, say, like Windows Hello or the thumbprint reader, and you can use your biometrics to get in, if you've already proven that you're a human there, then maybe we can lower that bar for how often you get prompted. But back to that, first thing's changing the flow through the login page, and then from there we'll start putting in place some of these mechanisms so that in the coming months we can start rolling that out.
Okay, thank you. And to tee off on that, Jason, if the users and our attendees wanted to communicate more information about, maybe they're experiencing a lot of MFA fatigue or experiencing a lot of re-authentication requirements, what would you require that they send to Crimson Service Desk for that feedback to your team there, to the IAM team?
How many times a day? And it can be a rough estimate, dozens, hopefully not hundreds. If anybody says hundreds, we definitely have a problem to fix. The better the information, the quicker we can troubleshoot it, but it can be a little bit subjective of, I have to MFA dozens of times per day. I commonly use, list off the apps that you log into, and it could be even that there's things there that you don't think of, like Teams versus Outlook, or Jira, or like Geoff said, there's over 400 applications that use Okta. So there could be things, and sometimes just writing it down, if you have to provide a list, you have to start by writing that down. And so you start taking note of, oh, I am logging into, 15 different Okta applications on any given day. And so, maybe that's just kind of how it is when you've got that many applications. Again, that's not how it has to be going forward. We're trying to fix that. But yeah, just start, I'll quote Adam Savage again: the difference between science and screwing around is writing it down. One of my favorite quotes of all time. So however many details you can gather up in a ticket and send to us, the better job we'll be able to do.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jason. One of the things that has been noticed is that the security vulnerabilities have and the malicious actors, it's all evolving very, very fast, especially with AI assisting and on that. And some things are getting very sophisticated for their attacks. So can you both kind of explain, how does Okta stay ahead of the evolving cybersecurity threats within our environment, and how it's helping to guard and propel stay ahead, one step ahead of the bad guy, if you will?
Yeah, this is maybe one of the biggest benefits of using a service that's provided to us rather than developing our own. Developing our own service to protect against what you're describing there, we have a very limited view of the world. Like, WSU is not small, especially if we think about in our little geographic area here, but we're not the whole world. Okta is, if not one of the top identity providers on the planet. So they have they have resources themselves that look holistically across patterns that they see happening globally, but they also tie into other large providers. So things like lists of known bad actors. A lot of attacks will just stop right at the front door of Okta and never make it to us. But then there is a responsibility that falls on WSU for how we configure and use the services that Okta provides. And that's where, again, going back to, we started with the kind of the diet version of MFA, and now we're moving to the full calorie version of MFA. And that comes along with, again, back to those, like the 5 W's of not just who the person is from their login, but where are they coming from? Are they coming from a IP address that's owned by WSU? Are they coming from something that's in the United States? What time of day is it? Is it in normal business hours? There's probably no such thing as normal business hours for students, but again, back to that researcher doing work for the DoD. Sure, they may log in at 2 a.m. someday when they have some weird thought in the middle of the night, but that's a case where they probably should get that extra level of MFA, where if they're just working on that during their normal business day from their office, they've used their biometrics to get in, we can probably chill out for a little bit. So it's putting more intelligence behind the processes. And when you do that, it increases the security of the services that we're using. Back to that, one size fits none. Sure, we have MFA there and we ping somebody with it all the time, but just the ease of MFA fatigue attacks or some of these other things, or you get a man in the middle in your browser. It's what we've done is a whole lot better than what a lot of organizations have done, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. And yeah, it's like you say, it's a never ending battle. But relying on pulling in information outside of just WSU, I think, is one of the biggest components for security that we can do.
Yeah, and to that point, Okta has entire teams that are more than in overall resources that WSU is throwing at this sort of a problem. They have entire teams for just, pieces of it. It's their job. It's their full-time job is dealing with that kind of thing. Whereas for anybody at WSU, it'd be, part of our job that we try to juggle along with everything else. So that's one of the biggest benefits we get with a provider like Okta.
Yeah. And you mentioned about intelligence. Does Okta utilize AI to combat cybersecurity threats?
Yes, they do. They also, some of you may have actually seen email from Okta that use that service. When it's some of the unusual login behaviors are just you used a new browser. It's that simple. Or you logged in from a new laptop for the first time. It can be that easy. But some of them are some of that pattern matching. And this is all circular. So, Apple rolls out their VPN-like service that I think is really more of like a proxy server configuration. So, okay, cool. They're adding that little extra security so that when you're in a coffee shop, you're not exposed to some malicious actor in that coffee shop. But then the challenge is, okay, now all of a sudden it looks like your login is coming from Wisconsin or something. And so initially Okta flags that and it's like, oh, this user is logging in from Wisconsin. That's weird. And so then they have to go back and tune those services to know that, oh, this is an Apple device that's using this thing, so we're not going to bug you about that. So it's continually evolving. And yes, AI and machine learning is definitely a part of that.
Nice.
You'll see that also with some of the password spray attacks where you get, there's some new compromise, and what they get out of that's a list of millions of accounts. They run their cracking software against it. Think back to that Hives table. They don't have to get all of them. They just have to get some of them. And then they know that people are going to people. So even if, jbob at whatever.com doesn't have an account on our system, there's a chance that somebody here used that same password. So they're going to try it. So a lot of those kinds of things get shut down right away because they're able to detect that and just shut down that spray attempt.
Thank you. So taking a step back in the past there, we know where we're at right now, and some of the common complaints or some of the things that people know about Okta is multi-factor authentication, right? We always have to do that, password prompting, and we have to do these things quite rapidly, frequently through the browsers. So there's a lot of extra steps that people have to go through, and they have 4 or 5 options to multi-factor authenticate, and so there's always a bit of pushback, right? Because they now have to remember not only a password, but now they have to do an MFA as well. But can we talk a little bit about maybe some of the benefits that have come by adding these extra few steps? What ultimately has really helped out the end user by all these extra things that we're doing? What have you all seen?
So if the question is just how to reduce the number of steps, or like the kind of confusion of, okay, I'm presented with all these options and what do I use when I'm logging in, that is again right back to that. The term to watch for in the future is FastPass. When we start talking about FastPass, all one word smashed together, and you can Google it if you want, that's addressing that particular problem. And it's where you're not just running, think of it, you're not just running Okta Verify on your phone, you're running it on your Windows desktop or on your Mac or whatever. And that's specifically to address those kinds of problems. And it's really getting better at the single part of single sign-on. We all hear like, oh, I need to set up SSO. Well, but then we end up with dozens of SSOs, and it's not really that single, is it? So, again, it's that kind of crawl before you walk, walk before you run. Well, we're walking now. And so now we want to start running, which is, okay, moving beyond thinking of applications in isolation to thinking of it holistically. And okay, we've trusted, so every single application right now has to trust its own session. Even if the user's already logged in, we're going like, well, we don't know what happened before, so we're going to throw MFA at them again. So moving from that to something where we trust the user's authentication first, and then we have to, put some boundary conditions around that. How long are we going to trust that for? What kind of hurdles have we put them through, etc. But then from there, you just open Outlook, you just open Workday. And from the user's perspective, they didn't have to do anything. They didn't get prompted, they just got in. But getting there is going to take some steps. And there might even be a little bit of a bump on the road to getting there, where for a period of a month or two, users may see a little, and I think the user first flow is kind of a sign of this, right? Today, you have both fields on the same page. A couple weeks from now, it's going to be 2 pages. So some people are going to look at that and go, well, you're making me do extra work. Well, we're making you do a little bit extra work now so that we can hopefully reduce a lot of work over the coming months and years. So yeah, it's a process.
And two, I think the aspect you were asking of, what benefits do we see from all the extra work that users have to do now? I think if we think of phishing, I think people are pretty well aware of phishing. 5 years ago, all someone had to do was get your password. All they had to do was convince you to share your password somehow through a phishing attempt. And kind of like Jason was saying with, harvesting passwords, you don't need everybody to fall for it. You just need somebody to fall for it. And well, now the bar's been raised, right? Even if I can convince you to give me your password somehow through a phishing attempt, that only gets me halfway there. I still also have to convince you to do something about the MFA. I have to convince you to go ahead and click when I generate a login, or to reset your MFA somehow, or I have to go behind to route around it. There's an extra hurdle there to compromising an account. So that's, I think, one of the biggest benefits of, it's a hassle, but it's an unfortunate, necessary evil of life in 2023 on the internet. And more things, you just see even social media sites and things like that now going to an MFA type of scenario for that same kind of reason.
And I think that ties directly into Jim Morrison's questions here about, he was asking some forms of MFA are insecure. And what are we doing about that? He didn't quite say it that simplified. I'm oversimplifying his question, but it's essentially that of recognizing that, the world is complicated. We're a land grant. And as Jim mentioned, we got students. So we can't expect that every student that comes to WSU has a smartphone and can use Okta Verify. So where today we essentially have it's Boolean, MFA on, MFA off. Okay, MFA doesn't work for you. All right, well, come talk to us, tell us why, and then we'll turn MFA off for you. Well, that's not really a good solution. We can probably do better than off. And so working at a hierarchical set of MFA policies and getting the default level to a higher security level than what we have today. So probably in the future, we'll see things like SMS as an MFA option disappear from the default. But then how we get there in a way that doesn't just cause a lot of pain and suffering is another question. So, things that we've talked about is this an opt-in process? Maybe we create the new policies and we let users opt in. And by using more secure methods and factors, we can probably reduce the number of times that those users are prompted for MFA. So it may be a better user experience using those. I'm trying to avoid using the word tiered, because tiered means something very specific in WSU, but just layered policies where the default is better than what we have now. But in addition to that, we have a higher, more secure option. Again, back to the researcher doing work with Department of Defense. They probably need more than the average person at WSU needs. But then at the same time, we need something that works for everyone. And for some people, that'll be a hardware token. Come to Crimson Service Desk or the data center operations, and we'll give you a token. But for some people, that won't work because of the type of device they're using or whatever, and they'll need some other option. There's people outside of WSU who have WSU accounts who work with underrepresented groups of students. And these people, work for a nonprofit organization, and they may have 5 minutes to spend per student that they help, and they have to help 50 to 100 students per day, get through some process. And they're working with organizations all over the country. So they don't have time to sit here with some burdensome process that WSU has for them to jump through. So we need something that's easy for them to use, but also doesn't compromise the integrity of the overall security of our systems when we do it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Geoff. So we are about out of time. Is there any last words or any last things you would like to share before we wrap up?
I think just stay tuned. We are on a quest. Maybe we're Don Quixote tilting at windmills, but we are on a quest to make all this stuff better for WSU. So stay tuned.
Wonderful. Thank you, Geoff. All right, then. If there's no other questions, I don't see anything else from our attendees. So we'll wrap up, and we would just like to end with a big thank you to Geoff and Jason for participating today and sharing this information. Big thank you to our ITS communications and Zoom teams for assisting us. Again, just as last two closing points, this presentation is recorded and it will be posted on the ITS website at the end. And then there will be a survey that will be sent out as well. And that is our presentation today. And as always, go Cougs and thank you.